Hey there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. I'm your host, PattSun, and today we're gonna be taking a look at r/TrueOffMyChest, where OP finally got his revenge against his cheating ex-girlfriend. Let's begin. I unintentionally have the best cheating ex-revenge story ever, and I hate myself for it. Posted by Reddit user Biscuits and Wine.
I was in a relationship with this girl when we were both in high school. Our relationship was very toxic, and I now realize that a lot of it was me. I would get insecure and jealous over every little thing that she tried to do, and would try to stop her from pursuing the things she likes because of this. One of the things she really got into was modeling. She started doing photo shoots with a pretty well-known photographer in our area, and this made me very upset at the time. This was almost a decade ago, and I have become more mature since, I promise. I told her how I felt and we started to argue. In the end, there was pretty much an unspoken agreement that she would be allowed to continue her modeling thing. I would soon come to realize that my assumptions, though in hindsight seemed absolutely delusional, were actually correct as I went through her phone and found messages between them calling each other daddy and baby. I confronted her about this and she insisted that it was purely platonic, and my dumb face believed her. A few months pass and I go through her phone once again, only to find really long conversations between them with an awful lot of I love yous, which they exchanged frequently throughout. This was still not enough for me to want to end the relationship, but the third incident was the straw that broke the camel's back. We were out on a date and at some point, she told me that she wanted to go through my phone. I told her that she's welcome to do so long as I get to go through hers. She then changes her mind, which only piques my curiosity even more. So I insist that she go through my phone and that I will do the same with hers after. She goes through my phone and finds absolutely nothing because I genuinely don't cheat. And as you'd probably expect, I find new conversations on her phone, this time with the guy's girlfriend, where she appears to be very upset, as she calls her various derogatory words for being in his house with him alone. This prompts me to end the relationship right then and there. They make their relationship official on social media just a few weeks later. Now fast forward a couple years, they break up and one of our mutual friends thinks it would be a good idea to get us back together, so that maybe I can help mend her broken heart. I don't mind the idea, as I've always felt like even though the relationship ended on bad terms, I could have done better in the relationship. So we meet up and one thing leads to another and we do the deed. She then tells me that she hates how the relationship ended, and that it was a shame that we couldn't make it work. I agree with her, although there is a small part of me that just wants to scream, "It didn't work because you're a lying, cheating bitch." We meet up more frequently over the next few days and it always ends with me and her in bed. However, at some point, she asks if I have any plans on making it official between us. I decide to lie and tell her I had just gotten out of my own relationship, and that I wasn't ready to start a new one. The truth was that I had been single for a while and was only beginning to be happy again. I started to appreciate having more time to actually do things that I wanted to do, to be able to be with my family more, and focus on my priorities in life. I truly felt at this point that I had grown so much since we last spoke, and that she was still the same person, just with a different hairstyle. I knew right then that I had no plans on getting back together with her. She then hits me with the last question I want to hear: "When will you be ready?" At the spur of the moment, I tell her that I'm not sure yet, but maybe soon, and so trouble begins. We continue to meet up and hook up and talk day after day. She asks the same question: "Are you ready yet?" You know when you're on a really long road trip and the kid at the back is constantly asking, "Are we there yet?" And you just want to turn the van around and tell them we're not going anymore because of them, just to make them feel shitty. Well, it was something like that. I couldn't take it anymore and just wanted to shut her up. But instead of telling her the truth, I told her something else entirely. I told her that this was all an elaborate ploy by me to get revenge on her for cheating all those years ago, and that I had been waiting for an opportunity to screw her over. I told her that I didn't care about her at all, and that she was delusional for thinking I would ever get back with her after what she had done. Of course, this conversation ends with her in tears and I drop her off at our mutual friend's place and we never talk again. It has been a few years since and I still feel guilty, knowing that she was probably in a very vulnerable state and that I had made her feel even worse. I would very much like the opportunity to tell her the truth, that I had pretty much forgiven her for what she did even back then, and that I understand that I was also very toxic during our relationship. But that's not happening because she blocked me on all socials, and the last thing I want is to drag our mutual friend into anything involving her ever again. Edit, I understand that the whole cheating thing maybe sort of justifies what I did to some people, but I was already pretty much over it at that point and was at first genuinely willing to give it a shot again. You might argue she deserved it, but I just feel bad knowing there were better ways to let her down and I just wasn't brave enough to deal with it.
No, OP, I don't think you were being toxic back then. You were suspicious, and rightfully so. She cheated on you multiple times. Your subconscious instincts is picking up on the clues and was telling you, but I'm assuming that you got gaslit into thinking that you're just jealous and controlling. But it's okay. It's perfectly normal for a young man just learning how to handle relationships. But OP, your instincts were dead on accurate right from the start. You just didn't know how to handle it back then. I hope you learned your lesson and have become far less of a doormat now. And now for today's second story. Am I the asshole for kicking my son and his girlfriend out? Posted by Reddit user HotWolverine7330.
This situation has had me a bit confused, so one of my neighbors suggested I post it here. I have 2 children, George and Gabrielle. Gabrielle recently got engaged and I am helping her plan the wedding in my spare time, which the entire family is very excited for. Except for George. George recently divorced his wife of 7 years, Susanna, after he said the spark had gone out. They have a set of twins together, Amy and Alice, and are trying to set up a healthy co-parenting relationship. Susanna is a great mother to my grandkids and I was disappointed in George for giving up so fast on their relationship without even trying couples counseling, but it wasn't my business or place to say anything. The drama started when George brought his new girlfriend to dinner at my house. He met his girlfriend, Bethany, through a work colleague and they have been dating for 4 months. At dinner, Gabrielle and I were discussing flower arrangements and Bethany felt the need to ask George if he'd ever marry again. George coughed before replying that he'd have to think about it, which Bethany seemed to deflate at. Well, this caused Alice to cry about how she wants mommy and daddy to love each other again. George and Bethany just sat there while my granddaughter screamed. After I comforted Alice, I pulled George aside and asked if he was sure about Bethany, which he told me was none of my business. I told him it was my business who he invited into my home and my grandchildren's lives, since I've been caring for them in my spare time while he works. George got angry and said it was Gabrielle's fault for mentioning weddings in the first place. I told him to stop acting like a child and to be happy for his sister. Then Bethany felt the need to insert herself and tell me that she and George were together no matter how much I liked his ex-wife. After that, I was done with the conversation and asked them both to leave. George and Bethany stormed off, flipped me the bird, and left my grandchildren at my house at 7 p.m. I had to call Susanna to collect the children since they had school in the morning, and I was attending a cake tasting with Gabrielle the next day. I feel like I shouldn't have to tell my 31-year-old son to be happy for his sister or argue with a random woman whom I have never met before in my own home. So am I the asshole? Now for OP's first update. I didn't expect this post to gain so much attention, and I want to thank everyone who gave their honest opinions and helpful suggestions. This situation happened a few hours ago and I thought it right to make an update. Bethany came to my house to apologize for how she acted at dinner last week. She told me that she was 2 months pregnant, and George had broken up with her after she told him because he has too much responsibility and didn't want to be in the baby's life. I then spent the better part of 3 hours talking with Bethany about the baby and what she wants. She says she wants to keep the baby even if George refuses to be in its life, and I told her that I would help with childcare if she needs it since she doesn't have any family that live nearby. Before I got angry with George, I thought I would call him and give him a chance to explain. George was angry that Bethany had shown up at my house and insisted that it wasn't his baby. I told him that he should get a paternity test and he asked me for $500 to cover it since he's struggling. I told George that he needs to figure it out himself since he's about to be a father of 3 and that he better step up and do right by his kids. George then hung up. Well, 2 hours later, I get a call from Susanna to say that George hadn't picked up the kids like he'd previously agreed to, and could she drop them at my place because she had work. I agreed for her to drop Amy and Alice off and tried to call George again. I called 12 times and they all went to voice message. I don't know where George is and have called his place of employment to try to find out, however they refused to tell me anything. I've agreed to watch Amy and Alice until Wednesday, and Susanna has reported this incident to CPS. I assume she plans to file for full custody, and I can't blame her. Right now, I'm worried that George has run off somewhere or done something irresponsible. I am disgusted and will not be doing him any favors in future unless he has a very good explanation and accepts some responsibility. This was hard to write, but felt good to get off my chest. Thank you everyone for responding to my first post. Now for OP's second update. Okay, so I made the original post about 2 months ago, and since then, things have been a bit crazy lately, so I just wanted to update as I had people asking if George was okay. In my first post, people suggested I give George some space and time to figure things out as a recently divorced father, but after he ran off around 2 months ago, I ended up filing a missing persons report. I talked to George's workplace the day after I filed the report, and they told me he had given his 2 weeks about a month ago. I then tried calling George again, and he finally picked up. He told me he was okay, but he had moved states and no longer wanted any contact with his children because it was all too much responsibility for him. I snapped at George, told him he couldn't just decide that he didn't want to be a father. Then George told me he never wanted kids in the first place, and those kids don't look anything like me anyway. George then told me to F off and hung up the call. After that, I informed the police department what had happened to let them know George wasn't in any danger and that we knew his whereabouts. After that happened, I just cried because I couldn't believe I had raised such a selfish person. Susanna has filed for full custody, and George, as far as I know, is refusing to pay child support and will probably end up in jail at some point. Bethany is now 4 months pregnant and is having a boy, and George is the father. Somehow he managed to come up with the $500, so he will have to pay child support since he doesn't plan on being in the baby's life. Bethany moved into my home in November since she's had trouble doing things herself, and her doctor says she's at risk of preeclampsia if she becomes too stressed during the pregnancy. In that time we have gotten closer, and despite how our first meeting went, I actually have come to like Bethany. Sorry, this isn't the happy ending some of you were expecting. I have been following the advice I received from the first post and have not contacted George, and he has not tried to contact me. I can only hope with time he pulls himself together and manages to step up as a father. Again, thank you to everyone who gave helpful advice. I'm not sure if I will be updating further, however. And now for OP's third update. Hi Reddit, it's been over 6 months since my last update after I completely forgot about this account. Much has happened in that amount of time, so as requested, here is the update. Well, first of all, Gabrielle is now married to her amazing fiancé, and I couldn't be more proud. The wedding was a small family affair at his parents' farm. George did not attend the wedding, but it was a beautiful ceremony all the same. Bethany has given birth to a healthy baby boy and has found an apartment and a new job. I am so proud of her for how well she is coping with everything. As suggested in my last post, we did get the twins therapy, and it has helped them heal throughout this whole process. After George took off and abandoned his children, our whole family needed time to heal and recover from the hurt and trauma. As for George, that's a messy situation. Roughly 4 months ago, George was found to be in possession of illegal substances and was arrested. When George first called me from the county jail, I thought he was trying to get money out of my husband and I. However, it just got worse and worse. He asked me to pay for a lawyer, and I explained that because of his actions, I couldn't afford to help him and that I couldn't trust him. George just sobbed and started apologizing for all he had done. I told him it was his kids he should be apologizing to. He kept sobbing and then told me there was another woman pregnant with his child. At first I didn't believe him, but then he gave details and I looked her up on Facebook. There was a picture of them as the profile picture. I hung up on him, disgusted yet still feeling somewhat responsible for what he has become. It was a few days later that we heard from George again, and he told us his trial was in 2 months. He sounded so scared, but part of me thought this was what he needed, to learn consequences, though I felt disgusted at my thoughts since he's still my son who I raised. My husband and I decided to attend the trial even though it was in the next state. We felt we had to for our son and peace of mind. I told Susanna and Bethany and they were bewildered, declining to attend. At the trial, George was found guilty of all counts, including criminal damage, robbery, and failure to pay child support. The judge gave him 6 years with no plea deal due to evidence. I didn't know how to feel. My grandkids won't see their dad for 6 years. It's been 4 months and I'm still confused. George calls daily, crying, apologizing, begging us to get him out and to speak to his kids, which I've declined since Susanna hasn't given permission. Bethany decided no contact with him or her son. I haven't reached out to his other girlfriend either, so unsure how to feel. This was depressing, but I'm glad I updated. Thank you for reading. This is probably my last post. I hope we can recover and heal from this.
Damn, OP. Your son sounds like a truly wonderful person. When he gets out, he will ask for financial support, and the best thing you can do is to ask him to get a vasectomy. If he really wants to see his kids turn his life around, then the first thing he should do is to stop the pump and dump mentality if he's a broke degenerate. This guy is a selfish ass with a moral compass of a wet paper towel. He has brought enough children into this world. Viewer support is the best way for me to remain independent and continue bringing you these daily videos, which will always be here on my channels for you to watch absolutely free. So please consider subscribing to me on Rumble and on YouTube. Both will be linked in the description box down below. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you even somewhat enjoyed today's story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and if you really like it, consider subscribing to PattSun to never miss a future upload. Stay strong.